Okay, before you get into this video, be aware that I called the game GenePunk when it should be GeneFunk. My apologies, both to the people that made the game and to those who are about to listen to the video. My brain just conflated GeneFunk and Cyberpunk together, and I didn't mean to, but I did. So I apologize. So carry on. Everything else I say is still valid. I just apparently can't remember how to separate those two words. Greetings, YouTube. Recently, I looked at a game called GenePunk, and it's based off of the 5th edition rule set. And I had talked about the fact that I despise cap stat blocks, those stat caps in games. I hate them. And this game came up with a way of handling that it made it much less egregiously annoying to me. And that is if your ancestry has a bonus to a stat, say it's a plus, 2 to strength, that means that your cap is a 22, not a 20. And that very simple mechanical change, by just opening things up to take into account that your ancestry, the species that you are, has a bonus to something, made those stat caps, I don't know why I'm doing that backwards, much less annoying to me. And it's something that I think should have been baked into 5th edition right out of the gate. If you've got a dwarf who's got a +2 to their con, why the heck can't they have a maximum of 22? Because if they don't have a maximum of 22, that just means that they hit the wall of 20 faster than other folks. But it means that a human could still have a con of 20. So how is that showing the world that dwarves are tougher than humans? They got a +2 to their con, which should be a reflection of the fact that they're tougher than humans, and yet they both have the same cap. So they're not tougher than humans. But if you bring the cap up, they are tougher than humans. That very simple change made that concept, that mechanic, much less bothersome to me. I'm not saying I'm on board with it, because I'm not, but it became much more acceptable. And I discovered that having the 5th edition rules presented in a cyberpunk science fiction setting, which is what GenePunk is, near future. I think the whole thing takes place just barely within the 21st century. So it's like in this, I guess, like in the 2090s or 2080s or something like that. Just presenting it as science fiction instead of fantasy made the rules more comfortable for me. It separated D&D from the mechanics of 5th edition, which bugged me so much. Because there are things I really don't like about 5th edition, as I've talked about in different videos in the past. But one of the things I did love about GenePunk, besides the way that they did fix the whole cap problem, and the fact that the rules to me seem much more acceptable as science fiction as opposed to fantasy, is that it is a biopunk cyberpunk setting, which is awesome. I love biotechnology with a deep and abiding lust. I really do. I've always thought it was just the coolest darn thing in the world. And you come out of the gate with the ability to play one of 14 different genetic lines. And the game says that there are, within the world that's presented to the players, there are 246 registered genetic lines. The game presents you with 14 of them. And there is a campaign setting in Korea, I think, and that also presents 5 more. I have not read that. I've not purchased that. I probably won't. But I just looked at the blurb for it. So that presents 5 more. So that it opens it up to 19, essentially. One of which is essentially an improved human. So you don't have any super duper powers, but you've just stripped of the negative genetic traits that may have been plaguing humanity for all these years. So you're not quite super soldier stuff, but you're just been had the negative traits removed so that you're not going to have to worry about them in the future. And everybody in the game has a built-in nanotech system. So everybody has got a nanotech colony living in them to help them heal and repair. Everyone has a computer hardwired into their genes. So every single person, and it's the rare exception when someone doesn't have this, you're really an outlier if you don't, has the internet at a thought's distance away. You just, boom, you think it and you know it. You have access to everything. On the downside, computer viruses are a whole lot more dangerous, and that's how they handle spellcasting in GeneFunk. By literally, you're reaching out and you are screwing with the computer system living inside someone else's body and warping their mind and their form by reprogramming their nanites to do things that they really don't want done to them. So the idea of having that in the setting was it just made me smile. I'm like, okay, this is kind of cool, because when you're trying to shoehorn spell casting into a science fiction setting, you can do it with psionics. But this kind of idea that you could literally, you're hacking another person's body was very cool. I also happen to really like some of the gene lines that were available to player characters. There's your bestial gene lines. There's a lion form, and there's like a crocodile form. If you want to play Killer Croc, they got you set. There is combat forms. There is one which is designed as a worker, and they were kind of cool because they're designed. One of the reasons they were made was for mining and such, and they are bioluminescent blue. So they always have light. So if you have a blue glow stick, that's what you look like. Makes sneaking very hard. But it's also very cool in my book because it just means that you never have to worry about light. And if you have ever been in a really dark situation, suddenly without light, it can be scary. These people don't know what that's like. They have never experienced it in their life. It's kind of like in a fantasy setting of having dark vision and then suddenly finding yourself under the effects of a darkness spell, because suddenly you can't see something that's never happened before. That would be terrifying. I remember reading about someone doing that to a player, basically saying to the orc in the group, you go blind. Because everybody else, it goes, okay, the lights go out. But no, for this person, they've never experienced dark. So suddenly you go blind. That's a lot scarier. So the idea of having bioluminescent skin made me smile a lot. I like that. Some of the bonuses to your stats are pretty big in this. I think there was one of them. I know at least one has a +4. I think I'm going to almost say one has a +6. And of course, being 5th edition, you can pick up bonuses to stats from your feat selection, which also open up the caps. Also a very smart rule. So all in all, I thought that 5th edition presented as cyberpunk science fiction was something that I'm like, okay, yeah, I can see that. I could see myself running that system. Whereas if you said, I want you to play 5th edition fantasy, and I'm like, I don't really have any desire to. Because for me, high fantasy is done best by PF1. PF1 is still the gold standard for me. It is the high water mark. It doesn't get any better than that in my book. For me, 5th edition is just it's got the wrong vibe, it's got the wrong rule set for high fantasy. Whereas switching that over to science fiction in a biotech cyberpunk setting, when you've removed those cap limitations to a certain extent, and you've divorced it from high fantasy, is much more acceptable. I thought it was pretty damn cool, the way they handled that. So I really do suggest you go take a look at GeneFunk if you have any interest in cyberpunk, and if you happen to be a person that likes the 5th edition engine, it's going to be very approachable to you because you've already got, you're bringing a rule set with you, so you don't have to do a whole lot of heavy lifting in that regard. But they've done such a good job with so many options of being able to tailor your own lineage, and you can pick up both cybernetic and biotechnologic advancements as you advance. You can modify yourself. So for example, you want to play one of the croc folks, fine. You can get gills installed. There is an aquatic lineage, but what if you want to play a crocodile that can breathe underwater? You can. And there's one of the lineages which is a halfling-sized person designed as infiltrators. They can climb like a gecko, and they have the ability to camouflage themselves. So they can will themselves to just blend in. But they have to do it actively. It's not a passive. And when they're not actively turning that on, their skin is completely translucent, which is just body horror stuff, folks. I read that. I saw the pictures, and I'm just smiling. I'm like, this is awesome. That was a stroke of genius, whoever wrote that. The fact that when you're not actively turning on your camouflage ability, your natural state is just your skin is translucent. So you can see all the bones and the veins and the muscles and the tendons and everything. That's really cool. Not to mention, you're gonna want to have to put on a eye mask to sleep because your eyelids don't protect you from light anymore. Oh man, it was so cool. So yeah, I highly recommend GeneFunk. I think it's a really good interpretation of the fifth edition. I think by divorcing it from fantasy, you've made it to the point where I'm completely okay with the rules, or I think that they just don't fit high fantasy. They fit this setting perfectly. Um, and now that I think about it, maybe I will pick up that setting book at some point. I really want to see what those other 5 lineages are, because that's the kind of thing I get into. Um, so yeah, if you want cyberpunk, to my mind, this is one of the best interpretations I've ever seen. The setting is solid. The biotechnology is cool. The cybernetics are cool. The idea of hacking other people is cool. They've just, to me, they just knocked it out of the park on this one, folks. They did a really, really good job. Okay, so I hope that you will look into this game because I think it's worth your time. And I had a heck of a good time reading it.